Dr. Carol Francis here. Let's talk about relationships today. Let's talk about what it's like to be in an abusive situation with someone whom you love, but someone who has become abusive. You, as an individual who's in an abusive relationship, you might have also reciprocated in an abusive way, out of self-defense or anger, and you can defend your self-esteem, for example, and attack back, or you can hit or fight back the way you're being hit. You can feel provoked and then respond to it. And I hate to say it, but when you're involved in becoming physically and verbally aggressive, you're contributing to the complications of the abusive connection, and you are participating in abusive interactions. You need to really come to terms with yourself and put a line and say, I'm not going to cross that line, but I also can't let that other person cross that line either. And when that other person starts being aggressive with you verbally, emotionally, physically, you have got to have an escape route. You need to strategically know when you need to get away. Now, do you need to get away in the moment, or do you need to get away from the relationship and start a new life? And that is always very difficult for individuals who are in love with someone who is also abusive. So let's just talk about being in love with someone who's abusive. You may be able to see what you think is the best of that person, the healthiest of that person. It may be that when they use drugs or alcohol of any sort, or any sort of substance, including sugar, by the way, where their moods change, that they become someone who's not nice. But you know who they are the rest of the time when they're in their right mind. But you have to realize, even if they may be altered by sugar, blood sugar, alcohol, drugs, lack of sleep, stress at work, when they are tipped over into being abusive, you can't hang around to receive it, regardless of why they're in that state of mind, and regardless of what they're like when they're not being sucked down by all of those external circumstances. Remember, they're choosing sometimes to use those things that make them not okay. They may not be choosing the stress at work, but it's not okay for them to take it out on you or anybody else. That's not solving the problem to exert some sort of catharsis that harms you. It doesn't help them to harm you. It doesn't help you to be harmed. So an exit strategy is really important. Now, we can talk about exit strategies in terms of getting away from the relationship, but just right now, in this moment, you need to consider the exit strategy you're going to use the next time that might happen. Where are your keys? Where are the exit doors you can get to quietly? How do you avoid them in the moment? What rooms have locks on them that also have access to a phone? You need to not engage and not reciprocate and not retaliate, because that makes you a participant as opposed to a victim. And that will confuse you when you start participating, because you'll be so involved in the back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, you might forget who started it. And besides, you might end up being provoked to act even worse than the original provocation. You don't want to let yourself go down that road, because you don't want to become that. But you also don't want to confuse what it's like when someone else has initiated the abuse and now you're responding. That confuses you. It confuses other people. It makes it so it's not clear as to where it's coming from, because you're not moving into taking care of yourself and protecting yourself, staying extracted. Now, we're not talking about having an argument. We're not talking about dealing with conflict or having moments of yelling. We're talking about when it crosses the line and someone's being harmed, and harmed by words, harmed by physical gestures, harmed by emotional manipulators. So it's when harm, not conflict, not arguing, not trying to come to terms and trying to find problems or express complications. We're not talking about expressing something that's going to move toward closeness or resolution or solving a problem. We're talking about when it just turns into aggression, violence, and oppression and manipulation. So at that time, you have got to know, before these events occur, how do I get away from that moment? Now, if that other person says, I need to get out of here, let them get out. Do not try to keep them there. Don't try to keep them. Don't worry about whether they're coming back or not. They're more likely to come back if they go out.